On the crystalline world of Ichor, the towering Iconians, beings of living gem and fierce martial pride, had long catalogued humanity as a species of fleeting significance, biologically fragile, emotionally erratic, and ultimately weak. Their archives, vast repositories of galactic knowledge etched into memory crystals, held humanity's entry under status minor. Threat level, negligible. The very air of Ichor, shimmering with refracted light from its crystal mountains and forests, seemed to hum with this serene, unshakable confidence. So, when the human xenobotanist Greg Wright arrived aboard the sputtering transport Wanderjar, a man more interested in endemic flora than galactic politics and carrying the faint rasp of a persistent cough, he was little more than a footnote. His faded, practical clothing and the way his gaze lingered on a patch of glowing moss, rather than the imposing Iconian official greeting him, marked him instantly. His presence, a minor scientific exchange agreed upon years ago, was tolerated, a speck of dust in the grand, radiant halls of Iconian endeavor, rather than welcome. But Ichor held a slumbering secret, a creeping sickness in its vibrant crystal heart, a threat invisible to Iconian might, their powerful energy scans, their millennia of accumulated certainty. Yet, as Greg Wright stepped onto the landing platform, the air cool and tasting faintly of ozone and something mineral he couldn't quite place, his eyes, observant and accustomed to the subtle languages of alien ecologies, caught a flicker. A magnificent crystal bloom, normally pulsing with an inner azure light, seemed diminished, its edges infinitesimally less sharp, a detail missed by the towering sapphire-hued Iconian dignitary, whose gaze swept over the human with polite indifference. Formally, Greg commenced his ecological survey. He moved through groves of colossal light-singing crystals that functioned as Ichor's trees, their facets echoing the ambient energies of the planet. He catalogued fauna that skittered like animate geodes, their crystalline carapaces refracting the light into 1,000 fleeting rainbows. The beauty was undeniable, breathtaking. Yet his specialized senses, compact and unassuming compared to the grand Iconian arrays, began to register minute deviation. A faint tremor in the energy signature of a crystalline vine, a microscopic spore unlike any documented in the Iconian planetary database, clinging to the underside of a geode creature. Anomalies almost imperceptible, like a single-off keynote in a planetary symphony. Greg's work defined him. His movements were methodical, each sample collected with a reverence that bordered on tenderness. His datapad, an old, scarred model filled with meticulous notes, sketches, and spectral analyses, he was driven by a profound curiosity, a deep-seated respect for the intricate, often fragile dance of life in any ecosystem. The quiet, dry cough that occasionally punctuated his concentration was a familiar companion, a minor dissonance in his otherwise focused existence, a small, understated testament to the biological variances the Iconians found so unimpressive. His primary point of contact was Stella, an Iconian scientist whose form shimmered with the cool, precise light of polished amethyst. Younger by Iconian standards, perhaps only a few centuries old, she embodied her species' inherent pride and a polite, ingrained skepticism towards this fragile human and his seemingly esoteric mission. Her office was a marvel of crystalline architecture, light itself seeming to be a structural component. "Xenobotanist Wright," she had greeted him, her voice possessing a faint, resonant chime, her posture perfectly erect. "I am Stella. I have been assigned as your liaison. Your requirements will be met within planetary guidelines. Her professionalism was a flawless, impenetrable surface. After several cycles of intensive fieldwork, Greg meticulously recorded his initial, cautious findings. In his small, allocated lab space, surrounded by humming, human-made equipment that looked almost archaic beside Iconian technology, he compiled the data. Slight, localized variations in crystal luminescence, a subtle dulling in the usually vibrant inner glow of certain formations. Unusual microscopic spore patterns, almost like a fine gray dust, appearing near specific energy-rich crystal clusters. A faint, almost negligible dampening of expected bioenergetic signatures in isolated flora clusters, subtleties utterly missed by the Iconians' broader, more powerful planetary surveys, which were calibrated for larger, more direct threats. He requested a meeting with Stella. In her office, the light playing across her multifaceted form, Greg presented his datapad. "Stella," he began, his voice calm, "I've documented some irregularities. They are minor, certainly, but consistently inconsistent with the baseline ecological readings your archives provided." He pointed to graphs, spectral comparisons, magnified images of the alien spores. "Based on my experience with xenobotanical degradation patterns on other worlds, these could be early indicators of systemic stress." Stella listened, her crystalline features unreadable, perhaps a fractional tilt of her head indicating attention. "Your observations are noted, xenobotanist Wright," she responded, her tone perfectly neutral. She accepted a data crystal containing his report. "I will forward this to the Planetary Ecological Council for their assessment, as per protocol." There was no hint of concern, no curiosity, merely the execution of a duty. The report, Greg knew, would be a whisper in a data storm. Indeed, the Iconian Scientific Council, or the subcommittee designated for such trivialities, briefly reviewed Greg's report. The official assessment, relayed back through their intricate data networks, was concise and dismissive. The anomalies were attributed to insignificant natural cyclical variations, common to complex crystalline biospheres. Alternatively, they suggested potential sensor calibration drifts in the visitor's less advanced Terran equipment. One assessor even noted, with a hint of condescension, a possible human oversensitivity to perceived environmental minutiae, a misinterpretation of Icor's inherently robust and self-regulating ecology. Stella formally conveyed the verdict. She stood before Greg in his lab, the ambient light of Icor making her amethyst form glow softly. "The Council has reviewed your report, xenobotanist Wright," she stated, her professional composure absolute. "They assess the phenomena you've documented as well, within established parameters of natural cyclical variance. They extend their gratitude for your diligence. No further action is indicated at this time." Her delivery was impeccably neutral, offering no personal opinion, yet implicitly reinforcing the Iconian confidence in their planet's unassailable resilience and their own superior understanding of its complex workings. Greg listened, nodding slowly, his gaze fixed on the datapad, still displaying his findings. He offered a polite, "Thank you, Stella. I appreciate the Council's time." Outwardly he showed no surprise, no overt frustration. But as Stella departed, her crystalline footfalls receding down the corridor, a different light entered his eyes. It wasn't anger, but the hardening of scientific conviction. He looked again at the spore images, the subtle energy dips. "The data doesn't lie," he murmured to the quiet lab. the hum of his equipment his only audience. He then turned, not to his bunk, but to his field kit, selecting more specialized atmospheric samplers, a high-resolution microscopic imager. A quiet commitment settled over him, a perseverance to uncover more undeniable, perhaps even macroscopic, evidence of the creeping ailment he felt with a certainty that transcended his instrument. A faint, dry cough escaped him as he slung a worn satchel over his shoulder, a small, human sound, almost lost in the grand, crystalline silence of Ichor. On the crystalline world of Ichor, the towering Iconians, beings of living gem and fierce martial pride, had long catalogued humanity as a species of fleeting significance, biologically fragile, emotionally erratic, and ultimately weak. So when the human xenobotanist Greg Wright arrived, a man more interested in endemic flora than galactic politics, and carrying the faint rasp of a persistent cough, he was little more than a footnote in the vast Iconian archives, his presence tolerated rather than welcomed. But Ichor held a slumbering secret, a creeping sickness in its vibrant crystal heart, a threat invisible to Iconian might yet subtly perceived by the quiet, observant human they so readily dismiss. The first signs were almost imperceptible. In the Crystal Gardens, a park famed for its bioluminescent flora, the sapphire blossoms of the luminar trees seemed dimmer. The vibrant blue light, usually potent enough to cast dancing shadows, now barely reached the polished crystal pathways. Simultaneously, a minor energy conduit near the outer rim transport hub flickered erratically, causing brief but disruptive power surges that snarled traffic and irritated commuters. Iconian technical teams, their crystalline bodies gleaming under the artificial suns, descended upon the affected areas. They ran diagnostics, adjusted energy flows, and employed standard purification protocols, all based on established principles of energy manipulation. But the luminar trees remained stubbornly muted, and the power conduit continued its erratic dance, spitting sparks of raw energy that singed the delicate crystal fronds nearby. Greg, observing from a distance, coughed lightly, adjusting his glasses. He watched as the Iconian technicians, their faces etched with frustration, redoubled their efforts, pouring more energy into the failing systems. He noted how they focused solely on the energy flow, seemingly oblivious to the subtle changes in the surrounding environment. The faint, earthy smell emanating from the luminar trees, a scent usually masked by their bright luminescence, was now strangely prominent. He sought out Stella, finding her overseeing the chaotic transport hub. "The energy fluctuations," he began, his voice a quiet counterpoint to the hum of activity. "They're not the cause, but a symptom. The trees in the Crystal Gardens, they're not absorbing energy as efficiently as they should. Something is interfering with their biological processes." Stella, her amethyst eyes narrowed, regarded him with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "The technicians are highly skilled, xenobotanist Wright. They assure me the problem is purely energetic." "With all due respect," Greg replied, "they're treating a fever with a blast of heat. The solution might lie not in more energy, but in understanding why the trees are failing to absorb it in the first place. There might be a bio-ecological component at play that's being overlooked." Stella's multifaceted crystalline face remained impassive, but Greg detected a flicker of something akin to intrigue. "Unconventional," she stated, her voice resonating with a subtle chime. "However, The standard protocols have proven inadequate. I will grant you limited access to archived environmental data for the affected areas. Consider it a supplementary analysis. He spent the next several cycles poring over the data streams, the complex graphs and charts blurring before his eyes. He cross-referenced atmospheric readings, soil composition analyses, and energy flow patterns, searching for any anomaly that might explain the lumina tree's decline and the conduit's instability. And then he saw it, a microscopic spore pattern, consistently present in the affected areas, dismissed by Iconian analysts as a common, naturally occurring airborne particle. Greg contacted Stella, his voice urgent. The archived data, there's a spore, microscopic, seemingly innocuous, but it's present in every sample taken from the affected areas and in higher concentrations near the luminar trees. Spores are ubiquitous. Stella countered, but her tone lacked its earlier dismissiveness. They are a natural part of Icor's ecosystem. These are different, Greg insisted. The structure is unusual. I need access to specialized xenobiological analysis equipment to determine their exact composition and potential effects. Stella hesitated. Granting him access to such equipment would be a clear violation of protocol, drawing unwanted attention and potentially exposing her to censure. But the image of the failing luminar trees, their light fading like dying stars, lingered in her mind. Against her better judgment, she subtly manipulated the access codes, rerouting Greg's request through a less scrutinized channel. The equipment will be available in Sector Gamma 9, she informed him, her voice carefully neutral. Use it discreetly. And do not log this analysis under any official designation. In the sterile confines of the Sector Gamma 9 lab, Greg worked tirelessly, his cough a persistent counterpoint to the hum of the analysis equipment. He bombarded the spores with various energy frequencies, subjected them to chemical solutions, and analyzed their microscopic structure with painstaking precision. Finally, the results came back. The spores were indeed pathogenic, actively leaching energy from the crystalline structures and disrupting the natural energy flow within Icor's ecosystem. As he continued his research, Greg encountered limitations in the available resources. He had no access to the Iconian planetary defense systems and was unable to analyze the planetary data for patterns. Lacking access to specialized tools, Greg used his ingenuity and knowledge of botany to concoct a makeshift solution to stabilize the affected area. Showcasing his resourcefulness and adaptability, he gathered samples of a rare, energy-rich moss from the shadow caves, grinding it into a paste and applying it to the base of a struggling lumina tree. Stella arrived as he was finishing, her amethyst eyes widening in surprise as she observed the faint but undeniable resurgence of light in the treated tree. The surrounding lumina trees remained dull, but this one, it pulsed with a renewed, if fragile, vitality. Iconian technology had failed, but Greg's simple, almost primitive solution had yielded tangible results. During a quiet moment in the lab, Greg shared with Stella a personal backstory about a devastating ecological loss on Earth, caused by similar oversights and dismissals of early warning signs. Humanizing himself and revealing his deep passion for preserving life. On Earth, he said, his voice low, we had a forest, the Amazon. It was the lungs of our world, teeming with life, but we ignored the warning signs, dismissed the scientists, and now it's a shadow of its former self. I won't let that happen here, if I can help it. Moved by Greg's personal story and impressed by his recent success, Stella began to seriously doubt the Iconian assessment of humans, conceding that perhaps your human perspective sees something we've missed. Greg, emboldened by her shift in perspective, proposed a dangerous expedition. The spores, they're concentrated in the withered lands, a region devastated by ancient energy storms. I need to gather samples from the source to understand how they function and how to stop them. It's dangerous, but it's the only way. Stella considered the risks, the treacherous terrain, the lingering energy fields, the potential for unknown hazards. But she also considered the alternative, a slow, agonizing decline of Ichor, its vibrant crystal heart slowly fading to gray. Against all logic and protocol, she made her decision. "I will accompany you," she stated, her voice firm. "Unofficially, of course. We leave at dawn." The air in the equipment bay tasted of ozone and polished crystal, a sterile scent that did little to mask the underlying anxiety. Stella adjusted the straps on her crystalline armor, the facets catching the pale light. "Are you certain this configuration is optimal, Greg?" Greg Wright ran a gloved hand over a sensor array attached to his environmental suit. His cough, a familiar rasp, echoed slightly in the confined space. "As optimal as it's going to get with what we have, Stella. The atmospheric dampers are jury-rigged, but they should filter out the worst of the spore density. For a while, anyway." Stella subtly adjusted the power regulator on Greg's suit, a modification not listed in the official schematics. A faint hum emanated from the device as she rerouted energy from the suit's heating grid to bolster its protective shielding. "A minor adjustment. It will provide additional resistance to the withering's energy drain." Greg gave her a grateful look. "I appreciate it, Stella, but don't overextend the power cell. I'd rather be a little cold than completely exposed." A chime signaled the arrival of the security team. Lord Varick, the squad leader, entered, his crystalline face impassive. 2 other Iconian guards trailed, weapons raised cautiously. Varick's gaze swept over Greg with clear reservation. "Botanist Wright, are we quite ready? I trust you understand the gravity of this excursion." "Perfectly, Lord Varick," Greg replied, his voice calm. "We're heading into a dead zone." "I don't expect a picnic," Varick snorted. "Your expectations are irrelevant. We are here to ensure your safety and retrieve any viable data. Adhere to standard protocols." The transport shuddered as it descended into the withering zone. Outside, the crystalline landscape was a study in decay. Once vibrant structures were now dull and fractured, their inner light extinguished. An unsettling silence hung in the air, broken only by the hum of the transport's engines. As they disembarked, the oppressive atmosphere pressed down on them. The air felt heavy, almost viscous, and a faint metallic tang assaulted Greg's nostrils. The Iconian guards activated their energy shields, bathing the area in a shimmering blue light. Almost immediately, a low growl echoed from the shadows. A creature, once a crystalline fox, emerged, its body twisted and corrupted by the withering. Jagged shards of crystal protruded from its flesh, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light. Varick readied his weapon. "Stay put. Defend here." The Iconian guards returned fire, energy-filled air. The mutated fox shrieked and lunged, its crystalline claws tearing at the shields. It was quickly dispatched, but the encounter served as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked in this blighted land. Greg examined the spore patterns on the ground, his brow furrowed. This isn't a random distribution. There's a localized concentration to the east, near that collapsed ridge. Varric scoffed. We follow the established path. It has been surveyed and deemed the safest route. Safest for Iconian physiology, perhaps, Greg countered. But the withering affects all life differently. The established path leads directly through a high-energy zone. We'd be better off taking a detour through the lower valley. The spore density is lower, and there's more natural cover. Varric's crystalline eyes hardened. I am in command here, xenobotanist. We follow protocol. Stella stepped forward, her voice firm. Lord Varric, with all due respect, the established path has already proven ineffective. We've lost valuable time and energy. Greg's analysis is logical. The lower valley offers a tactical advantage. Varric glared at Stella. His eyes narrowed. Are you questioning my authority, liaison? I am prioritizing the mission's success, Stella replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. And Xenobotanist Wright's expertise is invaluable. We proceed through the lower valley. Varric hesitated, then grudgingly conceded. Very well. But if this detour proves to be a mistake, you will be held accountable, liaison. As they navigated the lower valley, the landscape grew even more desolate. Twisted, crystalline trees clawed at the sky, their branches bare and lifeless. The silence was broken only by the crunch of their boots on the decaying crystal shard. Ahead, a massive structure loomed out of the gloom, an ancient Iconian edifice partially collapsed and overgrown with withered vegetation. Faded murals adorned its walls, depicting scenes of Icor's vibrant past. Greg approached the structure cautiously, his hand resting on his sensor array. This place, it's old, older than anything I've seen on record. And the Withering's influence is stronger here. He entered the structure, his gaze sweeping over the crumbling walls and decaying artifacts. The air inside was thick with dust and the faint scent of decay. Greg knelt beside a faded mural, his fingers tracing the outline of a crystalline flower. The artistry, it's exquisite, but look at the detail here, the subtle discoloration around the edges. It's almost as if they were documenting the Withering's progression. He moved to a damaged data log, its crystalline surface cracked and fragmented. He activated his translator, and a distorted voice filled the air. Energy fluctuations, unprecedented. The Great Seed. The voice cut out abruptly, replaced by static. The Great Seed, Stella echoed, her brow furrowed. What is that? Greg shook his head. I don't know. But it sounds like a potential source, or maybe even the origin point of the Withering. Suddenly, a surge of energy pulsed through the structure, causing the walls to tremble. A crystalline shard dislodged from the ceiling and struck one of the Iconian guards, piercing his armor. Varric barked an order. Report! The injured guard gasped, clutching his chest. Energy surge. Internal systems failing. He collapsed to the ground, his body convulsing. Stella rushed to his side, her hands glowing with healing energy. But the Withering's influence was too strong. The guard's crystalline structure began to crumble, and his light faded. Varric cursed. Damn this place! It's a death trap! Stella examined the injured guard, her expression grim. His crystalline matrix is destabilizing. We need to stabilize his energy flow, or he won't survive the transport back. Greg knelt beside her, his fingers probing the guard's wound. I've seen similar energy disruptions in human physiology. Try applying pressure to the primary energy node, just below the crystalline plate. It might help regulate the flow. Stella hesitated, then followed Greg's instructions. She applied pressure to the node, and the guard's convulsions subsided slightly. Varric watched with a mixture of suspicion and grudging respect. "Can you stabilize him enough for transport?" "I believe so," Stella replied, her brow furrowed with concentration. "But it will take time." Varric considered their options. "We are exposed here. The structure is unstable and the Withering's influence is growing stronger. We will return to base. You two, do what you can." He gestured to the remaining guard. "Let's go." The two Iconians departed, leaving Stella and Greg alone in the decaying structure. The silence was deafening, broken only by the injured guard's shallow breathing. Stella looked at Greg, her expression a mixture of dedication and concern. "They won't be back," Greg nodded. "We're on our own." Hours later, after stabilizing the injured guard enough for transport, Greg and Stella continued deeper into the withered zone. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows across the crystalline landscape. They reached a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center of the cavern, a pulsating crystalline formation emitted a dark, almost tangible energy signature. Spores swirled around it like a malevolent storm. "This is it," Greg whispered, his voice hushed. The source, or at least a major nexus point. He approached the formation cautiously, his sensor array humming. "The energy signature, it's unlike anything I've ever encountered. It's almost as if it's alive." As he drew closer, the formation pulsed more rapidly, its dark energy intensifying. Greg noticed a faint resonance, a subtle vibration that seemed to emanate from the formation and resonate with his own bioenergy field. Suddenly, the formation reacted violently. A concentrated burst of dark energy erupted, engulfing Greg in a wave of oppressive force. Stella cried out and instinctively threw herself in front of Greg, shielding him from the brunt of the impact. The energy slammed into her, knocking her back against the cavern wall. Greg staggered back, disoriented, his vision blurred, and a strange tingling sensation spread through his body. He saw flashes of images, crystalline structures collapsing, spores spreading across the planet. A vast interconnected network of energy. He gasped, clutching his head. "The Withering, it's not just a disease. It's a consciousness." Stella pushed herself to her feet, her crystalline armor cracked and scorched. "Greg, are you all right? We need to get out of here," Greg said, his voice strained. Now, as they retreated from the cavern, Stella noticed something disturbing. A faint, crystalline growth was spreading across Greg's left hand, shimmering faintly in the dim light. His energy signature, as measured by her internal senses, had subtly yet irrevocably altered. Stella found him slumped against the crystalline wall, his breathing shallow and uneven. The faint blue glow of the cavern illuminated the crystalline growths that now laced across his skin, shimmering with an unnatural light. "Greg, what happened?" Her voice was sharp with concern, her hand reaching out to steady him. He blinked, his eyes unfocused for a moment before recognition dawned. "Stella, I saw it." He coughed, a dry, rasping sound that echoed in the cavern. Stella knelt beside him, her crystalline face etched with worry. A faint tremor ran through her hand as she touched his arm. "Saw what? Are you all right? Your energy signature is fluctuating wildly." She scanned him with a device built into her wrist, her expression tightening. The crystalline growth was accelerating. Greg waved her off weakly. "I'm fine, just a bit disoriented." The vision, it was clearer this time, more complete. Stella's voice rose, tinged with a sharp edge. Greg, that growth, that energy, it's not natural. It's accelerating. You're changing. Tell me what's happening. He looked away, avoiding her gaze. It's nothing, just fatigue. Stella stood abruptly, her crystalline form radiating a faint, almost angry light. Don't lie to me, Greg. I can see it. I can feel it. You're more connected to this planet than any human has ever been. But it's not just Ichor, is it? It's the withering. She stepped closer, her voice softening but her gaze unwavering. Tell me the truth. He sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. I feel different, more attune. Ichor. It's like I can feel its life force flowing through me, but the withering, it's there too. A dark undercurrent, a parasitic presence. Stella's multifaceted eyes narrowed. The vision. What did you see? The withering, Greg began, his voice strained. It's not just a disease. It's an entity. A consciousness, almost. It seeks to merge with Ichor, to control its life force, to consume it. He shivered despite the warmth of the cavern, and somehow I'm now linked to it. I can feel its pull, its hunger. Stella's hand tightened into a fist. We need to go back, to the capital, the Iconian medical facilities. No, Greg interrupted, his voice surprisingly strong. There's no time for that, Stella. This connection. It's not just a curse. It's a key. I can feel the withering, understand its pathways, its weaknesses. But it's killing you, Greg. Look at yourself. Stella gestured to the crystalline growth spreading across his arm. Our technology. It could reverse this. We have to try. Greg shook his head, his gaze firm. No. The withering is spreading too fast. Ichor doesn't have time for me to be a medical experiment. We need to find the Great Seed. Stella's frustration was palpable. The Great Seed, a legend, a myth. We have fragmented data logs, whispers of an ancient artifact, and you're willing to risk your life chasing a fairy tale. It's not a fairy tale, Stella. I saw it. In the vision, it's real. And it's the only way to save Ichor. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers. The crystalline growths on his skin felt cool and strangely vibrant against her own crystalline structure. I know it's a risk, but we have to try. My connection to the withering, it gives us a chance no one else has. Stella stared at his hand, her expression torn. The faint bioluminescence of the cave reflected in her multifaceted eyes, highlighting the conflict raging within her. The data logs, they're incomplete, fragmented. We barely know where to begin. Greg coughed again, the sound rattling in his chest. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his strength. The crystalline growth on his face seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light. The withering's influence was growing stronger. Days blurred into a relentless cycle of research. Stella and Greg pored over the ancient data logs, their faces illuminated by the holographic projections. The logs, recovered from the ancient structure, were a jumbled mess of cryptic symbols and fragmented text, written in a dialect of Iconian that had been lost for millennia. Stella, with her encyclopedic knowledge of Iconian history and linguistics, worked tirelessly to decipher the text, while Greg, guided by his connection to the withering, tried to make sense of the symbols. The Great Seed, it's mentioned here, in connection with a planetary cleansing ritual, Stella said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. She highlighted a section of the text, the ancient symbols glowing a soft blue, but the details are obscured, missing. Greg rubbed his temples, his brow furrowed in concentration. The crystalline growths on his body were spreading rapidly, now covering his arms and legs. He felt disoriented, his thoughts becoming increasingly fragmented. The withering was whispering in his mind, a constant hum of dark energy. There's a reference to a spore source, Greg mumbled, his voice distant. The origin point of the withering, it's calling to me. Stella looked at him with alarm. Greg, you need to rest. You're not making any sense. No, I'm close. I can feel it. The spore source. It's the key. If we can find it, we can find the great sea. As days turned into what felt like hours, Greg's symptoms worsened. He experienced moments of intense disorientation, his speech becoming slurred and incoherent. The crystalline growth spread further, encasing his limbs in a shimmering, alien armor. The withering's influence was becoming overwhelming, blurring the lines between his own thoughts and its insidious whispers. One evening, as Stella was preparing a nutrient paste for him, Greg suddenly gasped, his body convulsing. He clutched his head, his eyes wide with pain. Greg! What is it? Stella rushed to his side, her voice filled with panic. The logs, the location, I see it. He pointed to a seemingly random cluster of symbols on the holographic projection. It's a map, a star chart, leading to a remote region on Ichor's dark side. Uncharted, untouched. Stella examined the symbols, her brow furrowed. The dark side, that's impossible. The terrain is treacherous, the energy fields are unstable. No one has ever successfully navigated that region. Greg's eyes were glazed over, his voice a strained whisper. The great seed, it's there. I knew it. Stella eyed the star chart, her mind churning. The far side. It was a grave endeavor. The risks were immense, and Greg, he was barely coping now. Greg, she said softly, her voice filled with doubt. I don't know if we can do this. You're dying, and even if we reach the dark side, there's no guarantee we'll find anything. Is it worth it? Is it worth risking your life for a legend? Greg looked at her, his eyes filled with a fierce persistence that belied his weakened state. Ichor is worth it, Stella. Its people, its beauty, its life. It's all worth saving. And I can feel it. The great seed, it's our only hope. My connection to the withering, it gives us a chance no one else has. Please, Stella, don't give up now. His words hung in the air, heavy with urgency and conviction. Stella looked at him, her heart aching. She saw the crystalline growths consuming his body, the pain etched on his face, the unwavering purpose in his eyes. She knew he was right. They had to try. Stella took a deep breath, steeling her commitment. All right, Greg, she said, her voice firm. We'll go to the dark side, but we need to prepare. We need to find a way to protect you, to slow down this transformation. Stella, driven by a desperate need to protect Greg, threw herself into her work. Using her engineering skills and the limited resources available in the cavern, she began to construct a makeshift containment suit. She scavenged materials from the ancient structure, repurposing energy conduits and crystalline shards to create a protective shell that would shield Greg from the withering's influence. The suit was crude, far from the sleek, advanced technology of the Iconian capital, but it was the best she could do. It consisted of a series of interlocking crystalline plates, powered by a small energy cell, designed to create a localized energy field that would disrupt the withering's parasitic connection to Greg. As Stella worked, Greg watched her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and concern. It's not necessary, Stella, he said weakly. It won't stop it. It's too strong. Maybe not, Stella replied, her voice determined. But it might slow it down. Buy us some time. She carefully adjusted a crystalline plate on his arm, her fingers brushing against his skin. I'm not giving up on you, Greg. Not now. With the containment suit complete, they prepared for their journey. They packed what few supplies they had, nutrient paste, water purifiers, energy cells, and their weapons, and set off into the darkness. The journey to Ichor's dark side was treacherous. The terrain was unstable, riddled with deep crevasses and jagged crystalline formations. The energy fields were erratic, causing their equipment to malfunction and their senses to become disoriented. The air was thick with a strange, metallic tang, and the silence was broken only by the eerie hum of the withering. As they ventured deeper into the darkness, Greg's connection to the withering became their guiding force. He could feel its presence, its pathways, its influence on the landscape. He led them through the labyrinthine terrain, avoiding the most dangerous energy fields and navigating the treacherous crevasses. But as they progressed, Greg's condition worsened. The containment suit, while providing some protection, was not enough to stop the withering's relentless advance. His movements became sluggish, his speech slurred, and his thoughts increasingly fragmented. The lines between his own will and the withering's influence began to blur. "Are you sure this is the right way, Greg?" Stella asked, her voice filled with concern. "You seem different, distracted." Greg paused, his eyes unfocused for a moment. I think so. The withering, it's pulling me. It wants me to go deeper." Stella hesitated. "But what if it's leading us into a trap? What if it's trying to control you?" Greg shook his head, his voice strained. "I don't know, but we have to trust it. It's the only way." After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon a hidden cave system. The entrance, concealed behind a curtain of crystalline vines, was barely visible in the darkness. "What is it?" Stella asked, her hand resting on her blaster. "I don't know," Greg replied, his voice filled with a strange sense of wonder. "But I feel something, a presence, something pure." They cautiously entered the cave system. The darkness gave way to a soft, bioluminescent glow, emanating from the strange flora that lined the walls. The air was clean and fresh, free from the metallic tang of the withering. The silence was broken by the gentle trickle of water. "What is this place?" Stella whispered, her eyes wide with amazement. "It's untouched, immune to the withering." As they ventured deeper into the cave, they discovered a pool of water, crystal clear and shimmering with an ethereal light. The water seemed to pulse with a gentle energy, a life force that resonated with Greg's own. "I feel drawn to it," Greg said, his voice filled with awe. "It's calling to me." He approached the pool, his movements slow and deliberate. He knelt down, cupped his hands, and drank deeply. A jolt of energy surged through his body. He gasped, his eyes widening. The crystalline growths on his skin seemed to recede, their light dimming. His thoughts became clearer, his senses sharper. For the first time in days, he felt like himself again. "Stella," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "it's working. The water, it's purifying me. It's pushing back the withering." But the relief was short-lived. As quickly as the effects had come, they began to fade. The crystalline growths returned, their light intensifying. The withering's influence crept back into his mind, its whispers growing louder. As Greg stood near the pool, another vision struck him, more vivid and intense than any he had experienced before. He saw the Great Seed, not as a dormant artifact, but as a sentient entity, a seed of consciousness that sought to propagate itself by consuming entire planets. He saw its immense power, its insatiable hunger, its growing influence on Icor, but he also saw something else, a weakness, a vulnerability to a specific biophotonic frequency, a frequency that his own unique biology, altered by the withering, might be able to generate. When the vision subsided, Greg staggered back, his face pale and his body trembling. "Stella," he gasped, "I saw it, the Great Seed. It's not what we thought. It's a monster." He reached out, his hand brushing against the cave wall. His fingers traced a series of carvings, hidden beneath a layer of moss. It was a map, depicting the location of the Great Seed, deep within a massive crystalline structure at the heart of Icor's dark side, a place of immense power and peril. "It's there," Greg said, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and perseverance. "The Great Seed. It's waiting for us." The crystalline air vibrated, a low hum resonating deep within Greg's bones. It wasn't the gentle hum of Icor's natural energy, but a discordant parasitic thrum that clawed at his senses. Pain lanced through his skull, a blinding white fire that threatened to overwhelm him. He stumbled, his vision blurring, the cavern's immensity pressing down. "Greg!" Stella's voice, sharp with concern, cut through the haze. Her crystalline hand, cool and steady, gripped his arm. "Focus. The map. Remember the path." He blinked, forcing his eyes to refocus. The cavern stretched before them, a cathedral of living crystal. Towering formations pulsed with inner light, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with the withering's influence. Strange geometric patterns covered the walls, resonating with the same sickening frequency that assaulted his mind. Each breath was a struggle, his lungs burning with a familiar ache, now amplified tenfold by the structure's energy. He coughed, a ragged, painful sound that echoed through the cavern. Stella pressed a vial of purified water to his lips. "Small sips. It will help temporarily." The water, cool and faintly metallic, eased the burning in his throat, but the relief was fleeting. The withering's influence was growing stronger, feeding on his presence, amplifying his connection to it. "We need to keep moving," he gasped, pushing himself forward. "The Great Seed. It's this way." They moved deeper into the cavern, Stella guiding him with unwavering grit. She scanned their surroundings, her crystalline eyes sharp and alert, her hand never leaving his arm. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the cavern. Two crystalline figures detached themselves from the walls, their bodies shimmering with malevolent energy. They were guardians, animated by the withering, their forms vaguely humanoid but twisted and corrupted. "Guardians," Stella hissed, drawing her energy weapon. "I will handle them. Conserve your strength." The Guardians lunged, their crystalline limbs moving with surprising speed. Stella met them head-on, her weapon firing bolts of pure energy that shattered against their armored forms. She moved with a fluid grace, dodging their attacks, her every strike precise and deadly. But Greg could see the strain on her face. The Guardians were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. He had to do something. Closing his eyes, he focused on the withering's energy, the discordant thrum that resonated within him. He reached out with his mind, not to fight it, but to understand it, to feel its flow, and then he saw it. A subtle disruption in the Guardian's energy matrix, a flicker in their crystalline forms. They were not truly alive, but puppets, their movements controlled by the Withering's energy. He focused his will, channeling his own connection to the Withering, amplifying the disruption. The Guardians faltered, their movements becoming erratic, their crystalline forms flickering and dimming. "Stella!" he shouted. "Disrupt their energy flow. Focus on the central nexus in their chest." Stella, understanding instantly, adjusted her aim. Her energy bolts struck the Guardians' chests, disrupting their energy matrix. The crystalline figures shattered, collapsing into piles of inert dust. Greg gasped, the effort leaving him weak and trembling. The Withering's energy surged through him, a wave of pain that threatened to overwhelm him. "We must hurry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The great seed, it's getting stronger." As they moved deeper into the cavern, the walls began to shift and change, creating new pathways and obstacles. The crystalline formations twisted and writhed, as if the structure itself was alive, testing them, trying to prevent them from reaching their goal. Stella, her brow furrowed with concentration, studied the shifting pathways. "The structure is adapting, trying to confuse us, but there is a pattern, a flow of energy." She pointed to a series of crystalline conduits running along the walls. "These conduits, they are channeling energy to the great seed, the Withering's power. It's immense." The conduits pulsed with energy, their light growing brighter as they approached the heart of the structure. Greg felt a growing sense of dread, a premonition of the destruction that awaited them. Suddenly, a vision flashed before his eyes, a barren landscape choked with dust and ash. Twisted, skeletal trees clawed at a darkened sky. Crystalline structures lay shattered and broken, their inner light extinguished. It was Earth, or rather, what Earth could become. He saw the great seed, a monstrous crystalline entity, its tendrils reaching out, draining the life from the planet. He saw the faces of the dead, their eyes hollow and empty. And then he saw something else, a flicker of hope, a resonance frequency, a subtle vibration that disrupted the great seed's energy flow. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The vision faded, leaving him gasping for breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "Earth," he whispered, his voice filled with horror. "It's destroyed other worlds. It won't stop until it consumes everything." Stella gripped his hand, her expression grim. "What did you see? What was that vision?" "A way to stop it," he said, his voice trembling. "A resonance frequency. It disrupted the great seed on Earth long ago." He coughed, a deep, racking cough that shook his entire body. And then he realized the resonance frequency. It was familiar. It was the vibration in his lungs, the source of his persistent cough, the unique properties of his respiratory system, the very thing that made him seem weak and fragile might be the key to defeating the Withering. "My cough," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's generating a similar frequency, naturally." Stella's eyes widened. "We can amplify it. Use Iconian technology to boost your natural resonance. It might disrupt the great seed's energy flow." Hope surged through him, a fragile spark in the darkness. But he knew it was a long shot. The great seed was powerful, its defenses formidable. "There's a chamber," Stella said, consulting the map. "An ancient Iconian research facility, abandoned long ago. It contains technology that could amplify your resonance frequency. They pressed on, their hope renewed, their purpose strengthened. The cavern twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the crystalline structure. Finally, they reached the chamber. It was a vast circular room, its walls covered in intricate carvings and strange symbols. In the center of the room stood a massive machine, its crystalline components shattered and broken. "The technology," Stella said, her voice filled with disappointment. "It's heavily damaged. It will take time to repair." She began to work, her fingers flying over the damaged components, her mind racing to find a solution. Greg watched, his heart filled with a mixture of hope and dread. As Stella worked, his transformation worsened. The crystalline growth spread rapidly across his skin, his movements becoming stiff and jerky. His personality flickered, his thoughts becoming erratic. He felt himself losing control, his mind slipping away, becoming consumed by the withering's influence. But then, for a brief moment, clarity returned. He looked at Stella, her face etched with concentration, her hands working tirelessly to save their world. He knew what he had to do. "Stella," he said, his voice clear and strong, "I'm ready. I accept my fate. I will sacrifice myself to save Icor." Stella stopped working, her eyes filled with tears. "No, Greg, there must be another way." "There isn't," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "This is the only way." "I understand that now." He smiled, a sad but peaceful smile. "Thank you, Stella, for everything." Stella, tears streaming down her face, nodded slowly. She turned back to the machine, her hands moving with renewed drive. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she completed the repairs. The machine hummed to life, its crystalline components glowing with a soft ethereal light. "It's ready," she said, her voice trembling. "But it requires a human biological interface to function correctly. You must physically connect to it, Greg." He nodded, his heart filled with a mixture of fear and drive. He stepped forward, his hand reaching out to touch the machine's crystalline interface. "Be careful, Greg," Stella said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want to lose you." He smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "You won't. I'll always be with you, Stella." He closed his eyes and connected to the device. A surge of energy coursed through his body, 1,000 needles of fire piercing his skin. He screamed, his body convulsing, the pain almost unbearable. The machine overloaded, its crystalline components cracking and shattering. A surge of raw energy erupted from the device, threatening to destroy the chamber. And then something unexpected happened. The energy surge ripped a hole in the fabric of the cavern, revealing a hidden passage leading deeper into the crystalline structure, a passage that led directly to the Great Seed. The energy surge ripped through the passage, tearing at the crystalline walls. Jagged shards, once smooth and luminescent, now rained down like deadly hail. The air crackled with unstable energy, distorting sounds and making the very ground beneath their feet tremble. Greg staggered, his head swimming. The withering thrummed within him, a chaotic symphony of power, threatening to overwhelm his senses. Yet, amidst the chaos, a strange clarity emerged. He felt the energy flows, the points of least resistance, a path woven through the destruction. He raised a hand, his veins glowing faintly beneath his skin. "This way," he said, his voice strained but firm. I can feel it." Stella, ever pragmatic, activated her wrist-mounted scanner. "Energy fluctuations are off the charts," she reported, her voice tight. "Crystalline integrity compromised. This passage is collapsing, Greg." She focused on a particularly violent energy fissure. Drawing a small device from her belt, she recalibrated its frequency output. A shimmering field briefly stabilized the fissure, creating a narrow corridor of relative safety. "I can hold it for a few cycles." "Move." They pressed forward, Stella working frantically to contain the volatile energy, Greg guiding them through the collapsing passage. A deafening crack echoed as a massive crystalline formation, dislodged by the surge, plummeted towards them. "Stella!" Greg shouted, lunging forward. "Too late!" The formation slammed down, a crushing weight of crystal and energy, trapping Stella beneath it. Dust and debris filled the air. "Greg?" Her voice was muffled, tinged with pain. He scrambled towards the fallen formation, his heart pounding. It was too heavy, too massive to move by conventional means. Despair threatened to engulf him. But then the withering responded. He focused his will, channeling the chaotic energy that coursed through him. He reached out, his hands glowing with an eerie light, and touched the crystalline surface. A low hum resonated through the passage. The formation shuddered, then slowly, impossibly began to rise. Greg strained, his muscles screaming, the withering tearing at his mind. He gritted his teeth, pushing harder, fueled by desperation and the primal need to protect Stella. With a final surge of power, he lifted the formation high enough for Stella to crawl free. It crashed back to the ground, sending tremors through the passage. Greg collapsed beside her, gasping for breath. Stella scrambled to his side, her face etched with concern. "Greg, you're burning up." She reached out, her hand hovering over his glowing skin. "Stop this, please. We can find another way." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and perseverance. "No," he rasped. "We're too close. I can feel it. We have to keep going." He struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. "Icor, it's counting on us." Ignoring her pleas, he pressed onward, deeper into the heart of the withering. They rounded a bend and entered a vast chamber, its air thick with swirling crystalline particles. The particles danced and shimmered, coalescing into fleeting images, alien landscapes, crumbling cities, dying suns. "What is this place?" Stella whispered, awestruck and disturbed. Greg reached out, his hand passing through a swirling image of a verdant forest, now reduced to crystal dust. "Memories," he said, his voice hollow. "Fragmented memories of worlds consumed." Suddenly, a vision slammed into his mind. He saw a long-lost civilization, desperate and dying, creating a weapon of unimaginable power, the Great Seed. He saw it unleashed, consuming entire planets, leaving behind only crystalline husks. He saw its insatiable hunger, its relentless spread, its utter devastation. The vision faded, leaving him breathless, his knees unsteady. It felt wrong," he uttered. It was a threat, a world-ending danger. Stella, her face drawn, held his arm. "What else did you see?" "Its weakness," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A harmonic frequency, a specific resonance that disrupts its energy flow." Stella's eyes widened. "The amplified frequency from the device. It's already affecting it, isn't it? Slowing its growth, weakening its defenses." Greg nodded, his expression grim. "It's our only chance." They moved deeper into the chamber, following the flow of energy. On the far wall, etched into the crystalline surface, they found it. A map. A complex network of tunnels and chambers leading directly to the great seed's core. "This is it," Stella said, tracing the lines with her finger. "The path to the heart of the withering." But as she studied the map, her expression darkened. Energy barriers, crystalline guardians, environmental hazards. It's a gauntlet. Greg reached out, his hand phasing through a solid crystalline wall. "I can bypass some of them," he said, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "My connection, it's growing stronger." Stella stared at the map, a chilling realization dawning on her face. This map, it wasn't made by the Iconians, it was made by someone else. Someone from one of the worlds the great seed consumed. A desperate warning etched in crystal. The weight of their mission, the enormity of the task before them, settled upon them like a physical burden. But even as they faced the daunting challenges ahead, a new threat emerged. Greg himself. His thoughts were becoming fragmented, his personality shifting between the human he once was and the alien entity he was becoming. "We need to hurry," he said, his voice a strange mix of his own and something else. Before I lose myself completely." Stella looked at him, her heart aching. She saw the struggle in his eyes, the desperate fight to hold on to his humanity. She reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I'm not going anywhere, Greg," she said, her voice firm. "I'm with you, no matter what happens." They continued to follow the map, deeper and deeper into the heart of the withering. Finally they reached it, a massive energy barrier, shimmering with raw power, blocking the path to the great seed's core. "Impossible," Stella breathed, her voice filled with despair. "It's impenetrable." Greg stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the barrier. "I can absorb it," he said, his voice calm but distant. "Channel the energy into myself." "No," Stella cried, grabbing his arm. "You can't." "It will destroy you." "It's the only way," he said, his gaze unwavering. "I have to do this, Stella. For Icor. For everyone." Stella desperately searched for an alternative, scanning the barrier, analyzing its energy signature, looking for any weakness, any loophole. But there was nothing. The barrier was absolute, unyielding. Greg placed his hand on the energy field, his skin glowing brighter. "I'm ready," he said, his voice barely audible. "Icor depends on us." Greg began absorbing the energy from the barrier. Crystalline patterns, like frost spreading across a window pane, bloomed across his skin, tracing the veins beneath. The air crackled around him, ozone sharp in his nostrils. A low hum vibrated through his bones, a resonance that felt both alien and intimately connected to his own being. It burned, a searing heat that threatened to consume him from the inside out, yet he pressed on, his eyes sharp, his gaze fixed on the swirling energy before him. Stella's fingers danced across her wrist-mounted scanner. "Greg, your bio-readings. Your human markers are declining rapidly. The crystalline conversion is accelerating. You need to stop." Her voice was tight with barely suppressed panic. The scanner beeped a frantic warning. "Greg!" The energy barrier pulsed, then fractured. A spider web of cracks appeared, spreading until the entire structure shattered in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. A shockwave of pure energy erupted outwards, a concussive force that threatened to flatten everything in its path. Instinct took over. Greg threw himself in front of Stella, shielding her with his body. The shockwave slammed into him, a physical blow that stole his breath and sent white-hot pain lancing through his limbs. He felt the crystalline structures on his skin harden, digging into his flesh. The withering's influence surged. threatening to overwhelm his mind. They stumbled into the next chamber. It was a cathedral of crystal, filled with intricate constructs, towering figures of faceted amethyst and shimmering quartz, their surfaces etched with glowing glyphs. They stood motionless, silent sentinels guarding the path deeper into the great seed. The air thrummed with latent power. As if awakened by their presence, the crystalline constructs activated. Energy beams lanced out, searing the air with violet light. Crystalline shards, sharp as razors, flew towards them, propelled by unseen force. They were under attack. Greg roared, a sound that was both human and something else. He reached out with his mind, focusing on the chaotic energy that pulsed within him, the connection to the withering that was both his curse and his potential salvation. To Stella's astonishment, one of the crystalline constructs faltered, its movements becoming erratic. Then, with a grinding screech, it turned, firing its energy beam at its own kind. Stella, recovering from the initial shock, scrambled for cover behind a fallen crystal pillar. "You're controlling them?" she shouted over the din of battle. Greg grunted, sweat pouring down his face. "Partially. It's in a struggle. They're fighting back." Stella ripped a panel from her wrist-mounted device, exposing a tangle of wires and circuits. "I can disable some of them. Their energy systems. There's a vulnerability. Cover me." With practiced precision, she began rerouting power, her fingers flying across the exposed components. A nearby construct shuddered, its energy beam sputtering and dying. But Greg was losing control. The withering's influence was growing stronger, clouding his mind, twisting his perceptions. He stumbled, his hand outstretched, and for a heart-stopping moment his gaze locked onto Stella. His eyes, usually warm and brown, were now swirling with violet energy, reflecting the chaotic power of the withering. He lunged. Stella cried out, scrambling backwards. She saw not Greg, but a distorted reflection of something alien and hostile. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. Greg gasped, clutching his head, his face contorted in pain. "Stella, I'm sorry." "I didn't." Stella, her heart pounding in her chest, reached out a hand, hesitating for only a moment before grasping his arm. "Greg, focus. Remember why we're here. Remember Icor." Her voice was firm but filled with a desperate plea. "Remember us." The touch, the sound of her voice cut through the withering's influence. Greg blinked, his eyes clearing. He saw Stella, her face etched with concern, her hand warm and reassuring on his arm. He saw the crystalline construct still attacking, still a threat to the world he was trying to save. "The constructs," he rasped, his voice strained. "They're powered by the withering itself. That's why conventional attacks aren't working." Stella nodded grimly. "They're drawing energy directly from the seed. It's an endless supply." Greg closed his eyes, focusing his mind. "I can sever the connection. I can cut them off from the withering, but it will take everything I have." Stella watched the constructs, their movements precise and relentless. Then her gaze shifted to their patterns, a repetition she had seen before. "Wait," she said, her voice rising with excitement. "Their movements. It's a harmonic resonance, a specific frequency, if we can disrupt it." Greg opened his eyes, a spark of hope flickering within them. Create a counter-frequency. Disrupt their coordination. He reached out, channeling the withering's energy, focusing his will. His body convulsed, the crystalline structures on his skin glowing brighter. He was pushing himself to the absolute limit. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber, a dissonant chord that clashed with the construct's harmonic resonance. The crystalline figures faltered, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. An opening, but the effort took its toll. Greg staggered, his face pale, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. He was weakening, the withering consuming him from the inside out. They pressed on, deeper into the crystalline labyrinth, until they reached a chasm, a vast abyss filled with swirling, volatile energy raw, untamed power that crackled and sparked, threatening to consume anything that dared to approach. It was a final barrier, a seemingly insurmountable obstacle guarding the path to the great seed's core. Greg stared into the chasm, his face grim. "I can bridge it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "With crystalline formations, I can channel the withering's energy, create a path to the other side." Stella's eyes widened in horror. "Greg, no, it's too dangerous. You won't survive. There has to be another way." Greg turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "There isn't, Stella. Not in time. Ichor needs this. You need this." Tears welled in Stella's eyes, reflecting the volatile energy of the chasm. I can't lose you, Greg." He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hand. His touch was warm, despite the crystalline coldness that was spreading through his veins. "You won't lose me, Stella. I'll be right here." He tapped his chest, over his heart. "Now stand back." Greg turned towards the chasm. He closed his eyes, focusing his mind, drawing upon the withering's energy. His body began to glow, an intense crystalline light that illuminated the entire chamber. His movements became erratic, almost spastic, as he wrestled with the immense power that coursed through him. He was walking a razor's edge, teetering on the brink of oblivion. He began to create the crystalline bridge, despite the risks. Greg strained, his body protesting with every fiber as he forced the final crystalline shard into place. The bridge, a precarious arc of interconnected crystals, now stretched across the chasm, shimmering with unstable violet energy. It hummed with a discordant frequency that vibrated in his bone. But the bridge was not stable. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, glowing with the sickly green light of the withering's energy. The air crackled with ozone, and the ground beneath them trembled. The structure groaned, a sound like tortured crystal, threatening to shatter at any moment. "Greg, stop!" Stella's voice cut through the chaotic hum. Her crystalline face was etched with worry, her sapphire eyes wide. "You're expending too much energy. Let me go first. I can test its stability." Greg shook his head, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The persistent cough that had been a mere annoyance now felt like a burning brand in his lungs. "No, it's too dangerous. I'll lead the way." His protective instincts, a deeply ingrained human trait, surged to the forefront, overriding his physical limitations. He wouldn't let her risk herself. Not for him. Not for Ichor. He took a tentative step onto the bridge, the crystalline surface cold and slick beneath his boots. The unstable energy resonated within his body, a painful vibration that amplified the withering's insidious influence. He could feel it accelerating his transformation, his cells slowly succumbing to the alien energy. Stella followed close behind, her hand hovering near his back, ready to steady him. Halfway across, a section of the bridge buckled, the crystals groaning in protest before collapsing into the chasm below. Stella cried out, her foot slipping on the crumbling edge. She flailed, her arms windmilling as she fought for balance, the abyss yawning beneath her. Reacting instinctively, Greg reached out, grabbing her hand with surprising strength. But it wasn't enough. The section beneath her crumbled further, threatening to pull her down with it. He had to act, and fast. Focusing his will, he reached out with his mind, drawing upon the withering's energy that now coursed through his veins. He felt a searing pain, a violation of his very being, but he pushed through it, channeling the energy into the collapsing section. The crystals flickered, then solidified. The collapse momentarily arrested, but the effort cost him dearly, accelerating his transformation, his skin taking on a faint crystalline sheen. "Go!" he gasped, his voice strained. "Now." Stella, her face pale but resolute, scrambled forward, reaching the other side of the chasm. Greg followed, his legs heavy, his vision blurring. He stumbled onto solid ground, collapsing against a crystalline wall, his body trembling uncontrollably. Before them lay the great seed's core chamber, a vast, cavernous space filled with pulsating energy, the air thick with a palpable sense of power. The walls were lined with intricate crystalline formations, glowing with an otherworldly light. And at the center of it all, a massive crystalline structure, the heart of the seed, radiating intense energy that seemed to vibrate the very air around them. But something else was there, something unexpected, a presence, a consciousness. The air shimmered, and a being of pure energy manifested before them, coalescing from the ambient energy of the chamber. It was a guardian, a protector of the seed, its form shifting and swirling, composed of pure, raw power. The guardian was a being of the withering itself, its energy signature identical to the destructive force that plagued Icor. It was immune to conventional attacks, a creature of pure energy, making it an impossible foe. Greg stared at the guardian, his mind racing. He realized then that they couldn't destroy it. It was too deeply connected to the seed, to Icor itself. To destroy it would be to destroy everything. It had to be purified, not destroyed. But the process, he knew, would require a complete transfer of his remaining life force. "No," Stella said, her voice filled with anguish. "There has to be another way. We can find something else, some other solution." She reached for him, her hand trembling. "Don't do this, Greg." Greg looked at her, his eyes filled with a profound sadness, but also with unwavering grit. "There isn't, Stella. This is the only way." He gestured towards the massive crystalline structure at the center of the chamber. "Purifying the guardian will heal the seed. It will restore Icor to its former glory." He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the final act. He closed his eyes, focusing his mind, and began the purification process. He reached out with his will, channeling his energy into the guardian, his body glowing brighter with each passing moment as his life force diminished. The guardian reacted violently, unleashing a surge of energy that threatened to overwhelm them both. Lightning crackled through the chamber, and the air vibrated with an unbearable intensity. Stella cried out, attempting to help him, to shield him from the onslaught, but she was thrown back by the sheer force of the energy surge. Slamming against a crystalline wall, she lay there, stunned, unable to move, watching helplessly as Greg faced the full fury of the Guardian. The Guardian began to transform, its energy becoming more chaotic and unstable, its form shifting and swirling in a vortex of destructive power. The entire chamber trembled, threatening to collapse around them. Greg, nearing the end of his strength, his body flickering with a dying light, managed to initiate the final stage of purification. He focused all his remaining energy, all his will, into a single desperate act. A blinding flash of light erupted from his body, engulfing the Guardian, filling the chamber with an unbearable brilliance. The screen faded to white, leaving Stella's fate and the success of the mission unknown. The white light faded, leaving the core chamber bathed in a radiant, crystalline glow, where twisted, blackened structures had choked the heart of Ichor. Now vibrant formations pulsed with restored energy, their facets catching and scattering light in a dazzling display. The air hummed with a clean, resonant frequency, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of the withering. Stella lay weakly on the chamber floor, her crystalline body flickering with a faint, uneven light. Each breath was a struggle, her reserves depleted. She reached out a trembling hand, the crystalline fingers brushing against the smooth, cool surface of the floor. Greg was gone. Only the faintest echo of human biosignatures remained, a subtle warmth radiating from the central crystal, a fleeting scent of damp earth and unfamiliar flora, like a whisper of a forgotten world. His sacrifice was complete. Above her, the sentient energy being, once a swirling vortex of chaotic energy, now floated serenely. Its form radiated a gentle, calming light, a benevolent guardian reborn. A wave of warmth washed over Stella, a telepathic communication that resonated deep within her crystalline structure. Gratitude, purification, his sacrifice complete. The guardian's message echoed with a profound sense of peace. Slowly, Stella gathered her strength. Grief threatened to overwhelm her, but beneath the sorrow a fierce willpower ignited. She would honor Greg's memory. She would ensure his sacrifice was not in vain. The flickering light within her crystalline body began to stabilize, growing brighter with each breath. With effort, she activated her comm unit, the familiar chime echoing in the restored chamber. Stella, to Iconian Council. Respond. The sterile, formal environment of the council chamber appeared before her, the faces of its members etched with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. Stella, Councillor Voren's voice, cold and precise, filled her ears. Report. The withering is contained, Stella said, her voice raspy. The core has been purified. But it came at a cost. Skepticism hardened the councillor's expressions. Proof, Voren demanded. We require irrefutable proof that the withering has truly ended before we accept any claims. Stella focused her energy, reaching out to the Guardian. A wave of pure, unadulterated truth surged through the comlink, a telepathic testimony that resonated with the very essence of Ichor. Some council members gasped, their crystalline bodies shimmering with awe. Others remained impassive, their skepticism unwavering. This, Guardian, attests to the human's actions. Councillor Lyra, her voice sharp with suspicion, broke the silence. A being of pure energy. How can we trust its judgment? This rite acted recklessly, defying established protocols. His methods are unproven. Stella closed her eyes, fighting back a wave of frustration. He saved us, she said, her voice firm. He gave his life to save Ichor. Is that not proof enough? She deactivated the comlink, unable to endure their skepticism any longer. Returning to the surface, she emerged into a world reborn. Crystalline flora, once dull and brittle, now pulsed with vibrant color. The air crackled with purified energy. The familiar hum of Ichor's life force resonated deep within her. But as she gazed across the landscape, she noticed something amiss. Lingering pockets of dead crystal remained, untouched by the purification. Small, isolated patches of black, brittle formations marred the otherwise vibrant landscape. A strange, distorted energy signature emanated from these pockets. A dissonant hum that grated against the restored harmony of ichor. It was different from the original withering. More twisted, more despairing. Stella contacted the Iconian research labs, relaying her findings. The scientists were baffled. The energy signature defied all known classifications. They could not identify its source or its nature. As Stella stood before one of the lingering pockets, the Guardian's voice echoed in her mind. Unpersistenced grief, fear. These pockets are a manifestation of the emotional scars that remain within your people. A wave of sorrow washed over Stella, a profound understanding of the Guardian's word. Greg's sacrifice had healed Ichor's physical wounds, but the emotional scars remained, festering beneath the surface. His sacrifice was only the first step, Stella. Your people must confront their own darkness to truly heal. Stella realized the truth. The withering was not merely a physical plague. It was a symptom of a deeper malaise, a collective emotional burden that had festered within Iconian society for generations. She must help her people heal their emotional scars, confront their fears, and embrace the lessons of Greg's sacrifice. Returning to the council chamber, she stood before the assembled members, her voice filled with newfound commitment. "I propose a planet-wide remembrance ceremony for Greg Wright," she announced. "A day of reflection, of gratitude, and of healing." A wave of dissent rippled through the council. "A ceremony for a human?" Councillor Vorin scoffed. "A sign of weakness. We are Iconian. We do not dwell on sentimentality." "This is not about sentimentality," Stella countered, her voice ringing with conviction. "It is about survival. The withering may be contained, but its roots remain. We must confront our own darkness to truly eradicate it. Greg Wright showed us the way. We must honor his sacrifice, not dismiss it as a reckless act." The skeptical council members remained unmoved, their faces etched with stubborn resistance. But Stella refused to be deterred. She would persuade them. She would honor Greg's memory. And she would save her world, not just from the physical plague, but from the emotional darkness that threatened to consume it from within. The conflict had just begun. The silence in the wake of Greg's sacrifice was profound, a crystalline hush that seemed to amplify the absence he left behind. Stella straightened her crystalline shoulders, the facets of her amethyst body catching the faint, returning light of ichor. She had a duty now, a promise to keep. She turned and walked towards the council chamber, the weight of Greg's memory a tangible pressure against her crystalline core. The chamber was a vast, echoing space of carved crystal, the air thrumming with barely held back energy. The full Iconian council sat upon their tiered dais, their crystalline forms radiating authority. Stella approached the center, her footsteps echoing in the tense silence. "Counselors," she began, her voice resonating with a newfound strength. "I stand before you to propose a formal act of remembrance for Greg Wright, the human who saved our world." Council member Zara, a towering figure of obsidian crystal, her voice sharp and cutting, immediately interjected. "Remembrance for a human? Such sentimentality is unbecoming of Iconians. We honor strength, longevity, not fleeting acts of sacrifice." Her mandibles clicked with disdain. To publicly mourn a being so ephemeral would be a sign of weakness, a beacon to those who would exploit our perceived vulnerability. Councilmember Vorin, a more pragmatic figure of sapphire crystal, spoke next, his voice measured. "The withering is gone, Zara is correct. Ichor is recovering. We acknowledge the contribution of the human. Perhaps a private commendation would suffice. Public displays of emotion are inefficient, disruptive. Stella met Zara's gaze, her voice unwavering. The withering is not entirely gone. Lingering pockets remain, festering with a distorted energy. And those pockets, I believe, are not merely physical remnants. They are echoes of our fear, our doubt, our unacknowledged pain. We need emotional healing, not just physical recovery. As if to punctuate her words, a ripple of panic spread through the chamber. A young Iconian child, no older than 20 cycles, who had been accompanying her parent near the edge of the chamber, suddenly collapsed, her crystalline skin dimming, her breathing ragged. The child had been near one of the few remaining dead crystal formations used as a decorative piece in the council chamber. "What is happening?" a frantic voice cried out. Iconian doctors rushed forward, their energy scanners flashing uselessly. "We detect no biological anomaly," one reported. His voice permeated with confusion. "Her energy matrix is unstable, but there is no discernible cause." Stella felt a jolt of understanding. A whisper from the Guardian, the ancient consciousness woven into the very fabric of Icor. The Guardian had been silent since Greg's sacrifice, but now its presence was unmistakable. "Empathy," it murmured in her mind. "The child is resonating with the pocket's pain." Stella pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside the child. "She's not physically ill," she announced, her voice carrying through the chamber. "She's absorbing the negative energy from that lingering pocket." She gestured to the dead crystal formation. "It's a concentration of fear, grief, and trauma." Skepticism rippled through the crowd, but Stella pressed on. She activated a small device, a prototype developed with Iconian scientists, designed to analyze energy signatures. She pointed it at the child, then at the lingering pocket. The device displayed 2 waveforms, eerily similar, one a distorted echo of the other. "See?" Stella said, her voice urgent. "The child's energy signature mirrors the distorted energy of the pocket. They are linked." "This is preposterous," Zara exclaimed. "Superstition and conjecture. You would condemn us to such nonsense?" Stella ignored her. "We need to address the emotional wounds, counselors. I propose a small-scale test, a remembrance ceremony held near that pocket. We will monitor the child's condition and the pocket's energy levels. If I am wrong, no harm will be done. But if I am right..." Vorin, his sapphire eyes narrowed in thought, spoke up. "There is a certain logic to her hypothesis. If the child's condition improves, it would provide empirical evidence. A controlled trial, with strict parameters. I can persuade a few council members to support a trial run." Zara's obsidian form seemed to darken with rage. "You would risk the life of a child on such a fanciful notion? You are exploiting her suffering for your own political gain, Stella." Despite Zara's vehement opposition, Vorin managed to sway enough council members to authorize a limited trial. A small clearing near the affected area was prepared. A crowd gathered, a mixture of hopeful citizens and skeptical onlookers. The child, still weak but conscious, lay on a crystalline stretcher nearby. As Stella stepped forward, she felt a familiar surge of anxiety. She was about to break a fundamental Iconian taboo, the open expression of emotion. She took a deep breath, remembering Greg's quiet courage. "Iconians," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "we gather here today not to celebrate strength, but to acknowledge loss. I want to tell you about Greg Wright. He was empathetic. He saw the beauty in things we overlooked. He felt the pain of Icor as if it were his own. He listened when we would not. She shared personal stories, anecdotes of Greg's kindness, his curiosity, his unwavering belief in the interconnectedness of all things. She spoke of his cough, the human frailty they had dismissed as weakness, now understood as a sign of his deep connection to Ichor's ecosystem. As she spoke, a visible change occurred. The child's crystalline skin began to regain its luster. Her breathing became more regular. The energy signature of the nearby lingering pocket weakened, the distorted waveform smoothing out. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Suddenly, the lingering pocket pulsed with a blinding surge of energy. A wave of force slammed into the crowd, and images flooded their minds, visions of Ichor's traumatic past. Wars between crystalline factions, devastating meteor strikes, ecological collapses, societal purges. The crowd recoiled in horror, their faces contorted with fear and grief. Panic erupted. "I told you," Zara screamed, her voice triumphant. "This ceremony is dangerous, destabilizing. It must be stopped." Stella staggered, the force of the vision momentarily overwhelming her. But then she saw Greg's face in her mind, his gentle smile, his unwavering belief in hope. She drew strength from his memory, her voice ringing out above the chaos. "Iconians, I know your pain. I see your fear. But we cannot let these memories consume us. We are stronger than this. We have survived before, and we will survive again. We must acknowledge our pain, but we must also choose hope." As her words echoed through the clearing, the Guardian's voice resonated in her mind. Stronger now, more urgent. The pulse, it was a defense, a warning. Something is coming, drawn to the pain, seeking to exploit our vulnerability. A hush fell over Ichor, heavier than the crystalline dust settling from the withering's final throes. The light, once so vibrant, seemed muted, as if the planet itself mourned the loss of the quiet human who had saved it. But the silence was deceptive. Strange energy readings began to spike near the lingering pockets of the withering, the sensors registering fluctuations unlike anything the Iconians had encountered. The air shimmered in those areas, blurring the sharp edges of the crystalline structures, creating visual distortions that played tricks on the eye. A low, almost subsonic hum vibrated through the ground, unsettling the few Iconians who dared venture near. Iconian security forces, clad in their gem-encrusted armor, investigated the disturbances. Their scanners detected no physical cause, no known energy source. Yet a pervasive sense of dread clung to the air, a creeping paranoia that gnawed at their usually stoic mind. Reports flooded in, sleeplessness, irrational fears, whispers of unseen horrors lurking in the shadows. Zara, her amethyst armor gleaming under the dimmed light, seized the opportunity. She addressed the Iconian Council, her voice resonating with righteous fury. "This," she declared, gesturing towards the holographic displays showcasing the energy anomalies, "is the price of sentimentality. Stella's human-inspired remembrance ceremony has weakened Ichor's defenses, opened a gateway to dark energies. We have invited this affliction upon ourselves." Stella, her sapphire eyes filled with grief and defiance, stood firm, but even she felt a tremor of unease. Driven by Zara's accusations and the growing unrest, she turned to Vorin. Together they accessed the deepest levels of the Iconian historical archives, a repository of ancient knowledge and forgotten legends. They pored over fragmented texts, translated archaic glyphs, searching for any mention of similar phenomena. They found whispers, dismissed as folklore for millennia, of entities drawn to emotional turmoil, beings that thrived on societal discord. The Guardian, its crystalline form radiating a soft, steady light, confirmed their fears. The legends speak of an emotivore, it intoned, its voice echoing with ancient wisdom, a being that consumes and amplifies negative emotions. It feeds on fear, anger, despair, driving societies to collapse from within. The emotivore's influence began to manifest in insidious ways. Petty arguments escalated into full-blown disputes, old grudges resurfaced with renewed venom, and paranoia spread like a contagion. Iconians, normally paragons of logic and reason, succumbed to fits of rage, suspicion, and crippling anxiety. The once harmonious society teetered on the brink of chaos. Zara, ever the opportunist, capitalized on the escalating turmoil. She consolidated her power base, promising a return to traditional values, a suppression of all emotional expression. "We must rebuild our defenses," she proclaimed, "seal ourselves off from these human weaknesses. Emotion is a vulnerability, a disease. We must purge it from our society." Her loyalists enforced her decrees with ruthless efficiency, silencing dissent and further dividing the Iconian population. Stella, guided by Greg's principles of empathy and understanding, argued for a different approach. "Suppressing emotions will only feed the emotivore," she countered. "We must address the root causes of this negativity, not bury it. We must heal the wounds within our society, foster compassion, and remember the lessons Greg taught us." She proposed community healing sessions, open dialogues, and a renewed focus on the values of empathy and understanding. Vorin, torn between his pragmatic instincts and his growing respect for Stella's idealism, attempted to broker a compromise. He supported some of Stella's initiatives while simultaneously enforcing Zara's restrictions, resulting in a fragmented and ultimately ineffective response to the emotivore's growing influence. Undeterred, Stella organized small, secret gatherings, risking Zara's wrath. In hidden chambers and secluded gardens, she shared memories of Greg, recounting his acts of kindness, his unwavering belief in the power of empathy, and his ultimate sacrifice. She encouraged others to share their own stories, fostering a sense of connection and shared humanity. During one of these clandestine meetings, an Iconian child, its crystalline eyes wide with fear, spoke of its nightmares, its terror of the shadows that seemed to be closing in on Icor. The child's vulnerability triggered a surge of collective compassion and support among the attendees, a wave of positive emotion that momentarily pushed back the encroaching darkness. The Guardian appeared, its light intensifying. "You have touched upon a truth," it declared. "The emotivore is vulnerable to positive emotions, but it amplifies negative ones. This is a high-risk, high-reward scenario. Any error could deepen the crisis." Zara's forces, alerted by a source, disrupted one of Stella's meetings. "Rebellion," the guard captain declared, his voice loud in his armor. "You are accused of undermining Iconian stability, of consorting with human sympathizers. Arrest them all." Vorin arrived, his face etched with conflict. He intervened, preventing the immediate arrest. "This is madness," he exclaimed. "We cannot afford a civil war. Stella, I order you to cease these activities." You are endangering us all. Stella, her sapphire eyes blazing with defiance, refused to yield. Suppressing empathy will only strengthen the emotivore, Vorin. I cannot stand by and watch Icor succumb to fear and hatred. She commitment to continue her mission in secrecy, risking imprisonment and further societal division. Then it happened. The emotivore manifested physically for the first time. In a public square rife with fear and discord, a shadowy, amorphous figure coalesced, its form shifting and swirling like smoke. It fed on the palpable negativity, growing larger and more menacing with each passing moment. The guardian appeared before Stella, its light dimmed with concern. The emotivore's physical form is weakest near the site of Greg's sacrifice, it revealed. His act of selfless love left a residual energy, a beacon of hope that the emotivore cannot fully extinguish. Stella, understanding the immense risk, conceived a daring plan. She would organize a large-scale public remembrance ceremony at the site of Greg's sacrifice, hoping to generate a concentrated surge of positive emotions capable of weakening or even destroying the emotivore. But Zara discovered Stella's clandestine plan. She readied her people, preparing to halt the ceremony directly, setting the stage for a major conflict that would decide the future of Icor and the Iconian people. The emotivore, sensing the impending conflict and the potential for a feast of negative emotions, began to grow in power and influence, casting a palpable darkness over Icor, leaving the Iconians teetering on the brink of destruction. The crystalline city of Etheria, once a beacon of vibrant energy, now felt muted, stifled. Zara's decree had descended like a shroud. Iconians, their multifaceted bodies usually shimmering with inner light, moved with a subdued caution. Security patrols, their crystalline armor glinting harshly under the plasma lamps, stopped citizens at random, demanding identification and purpose. The once familiar hum of communal energy conduits felt replaced by a low, unsettling thrum of surveillance. Deep within the city's underbelly, in a disused crystal crafting workshop, a small group huddled. Whispered words, coded phrases, and glances exchanged in the dim light replaced open communication. The curfew tightens with each cycle. Lyra, a young artisan, murmured, her voice barely audible above the drip of condensation. Zara's grip is tightening. Across the city in Zara's private chambers, Vorin stood before her, his crystalline brow furrowed. Zara, these measures, they are excessive. The curfews, the surveillance. It breeds resentment, not security. Zara turned, her sapphire eyes glacial. Resentment is a luxury we cannot afford, Vorin. The emotivore thrives on chaos. Order is our only defense. But at what cost? We are stifling the very hope we need to combat it. The people are losing faith. Zara's crystalline hand clenched. Faith is not enough. Strength is. Control is. You mistake compassion for weakness, Vorin. Elsewhere, in a small sunlit plaza, an Iconian child laughed, chasing a crystal butterfly. The air shimmered with joy. Then, abruptly, the child stopped, their laughter dying in their throat. Their crystalline body dulled, the butterfly fluttering away as the child's face became blank, devoid of emotion. The emotivore's reach extended, insidious and cruel. Stella, witnessing the event from a distance, felt a surge of grief and perseverance. Back in the hidden workshop, she addressed her followers. We must adapt. Public gatherings are too dangerous. We will focus on smaller, protected enclave. We will carry the light to them, one spark at a time. Across the room, Kalen, a young tech artisan, adjusted a complex device. The resonance shield is nearing completion. It will dampen the emotional resonance, masking our gatherings from the emotivore's detection. The device pulsed with a soft emerald light, but Zara's reach was long. In a sterile surveillance center, rows of Iconians monitored communication channels, their crystalline fingers flying across consoles. Intercepted messages flashed across screens, coded but suspicious. Decrypt sequence initiated, a supervisor droned. Identify potential dissenters. In Zara's chambers, Vorin tried again. Zara, the surveillance, the people feel hunted. You are pushing them to the brink. Zara rounded on him, her voice sharp as fractured crystal. And you, Vorin, do you also feel hunted? Do you question my method? I question the path we are on. We are becoming the very thing we fight. Zara's eyes narrowed. You disappoint me, Vorin. I expected more strength from you. Only unwavering control can save Icor from total annihilation. Deep beneath the surface, Stella, guided by ancient maps and her intimate knowledge of Icor's geological formations, discovered a network of crystal caves. The air hummed with a faint, natural energy. These caves, they are ancient, untouched. They will provide sanctuary. Above, the sky darkened. The emotivore, sensing Stella's preparations, unleashed its fury. Violent storms raged across Icor, disrupting communication lines and isolating communities. Crystalline structures groaned under the force of the wind, and the air crackled with chaotic energy. Stella, undeterred, gathered her followers. They braved the storms, navigating treacherous terrain, their crystalline bodies shimmering with grit. They reached isolated communities, delivering messages of hope, urging participation in the upcoming remembrance ceremony. In the heart of Zara's fortress, Vorin made a decision. He accessed a secure communication channel, sending a coded message to Stella. He couldn't stand by any longer. In the hidden caves, the Guardian appeared before Stella, its form shimmering with ethereal light. The emotivore prepares a null reaction, a surge of amplified discord to disrupt the ceremony. Stella's fragile heart ached. We must protect the ceremony, not only from Zara, but from the emotivore's emotional assault. We need a multi-layered defense. Zara, reviewing intercepted communications, saw Vorin's betrayal. "Arrest Vorin for treason," she roared. But Vorin, warned by loyalists within the security forces, evaded capture. He reached the crystal caves, joining forces with Stella. "I offer my strategic expertise, my access to hidden locations. Let me help you fortify the ceremony's defenses." Zara, enraged, issued her final order. "Deploy all available forces, crush any resistance. The ceremony will not take place. Icor's survival depends on it." As Zara's forces mobilized, the emotivore unleashed its counter-resonance. A wave of fear, doubt, and despair washed over the gathering, testing the resilience of Stella and her allies, casting a dark shadow over the proceedings. The fate of Icor hung in the balance. The initial assault crashed against the crystal caves like a tidal wave of discordant energy. Zara's forces, clad in obsidian armor that drank the light, hammered at the main access points, their energy weapons screeching as they overloaded the natural crystal formations. Each blast sent tremors through the caves, showering the ceremony participants with glittering dust and the acrid scent of burnt crystal. But Vorin had anticipated this brute force approach. Small, mobile defense teams, Iconians nimble and swift despite their crystalline bodies, darted through the side tunnels, harassing Zara's advance. They were like stinging insects, launching hit-and-run attacks, collapsing sections of tunnel to create diversions, and generally slowing the relentless march of Zara's troop. Stella, her mind racing, used her intimate knowledge of the caves to amplify these efforts. She triggered preset traps, razor-sharp crystal shards that rained down on unsuspecting attackers, energy fields that redirected Zara's own fire back against her troops. Each successful defense bought them precious time, but the cost was mounting. Then came the insidious creep of the Emotivore's counter-resonance. It wasn't a physical weapon, but a psychic assault. A wave of despair that washed over the caves. Panic flared. Iconians, moments before resolute, now argued amongst themselves, their crystalline faces etched with fear. One soldier, believing his family lost, left his station. Another, stunned by Ikor's center failing, just cried. The planned defenses began to weaken quickly. Stella fought back, channeling her grief and her unwavering belief in Greg's sacrifice into the resonance shield. She created localized zones of hope within the caves, shimmering pockets of light where the Emotivore's influence was muted. Within these zones, Iconians found temporary respite, their fear receding, their purpose returning. They clustered around the shields like moths to a flame, drawing strength from Stella's unwavering spirit. Seeing the defenses holding, Zara likely anticipated the next move. Vorin, ever the tactician, led a daring raid on Zara's communication center, a cluster of mobile crystal relays humming with dark energy. His goal, disrupt Zara's command structure, sow confusion among her troops, and buy Stella more time. The team moved with practiced stealth, their footsteps muffled by the Emotivore's psychic noise. But Zara was ready. As Vorin's team breached the outer perimeter, a section of the tunnel collapsed, trapping them in a narrow chasm. A barrage of energy fire followed, cutting off their escape. Several key members of the resistance fell, their light extinguished. Vorin, his crystalline armor shattered and sparking, fought with desperate ferocity, buying time for the others to fall back. He managed to escape the trap, but not unscathed. A searing blast grazed his side, leaving a jagged wound that pulsed with dark energy. Severely wounded and bleeding crystalline Ikor, he was forced to retreat deeper into the caves, losing contact with Stella in the chaos. Unaware of Vorin's capture, Stella continued to rally the remaining ceremony participants. Her voice, amplified by the cave's natural acoustics, echoed through the tunnels, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. "Remember Greg," she cried. "Remember his sacrifice. He gave his life for Ikor, and we will not let his memory be tarnished by despair. We will fight. We will endure. We will survive." But the Emotivore, sensing Stella's strength, now targeted her directly. Visions flooded her mind, Ikor's crystalline structures collapsing into dust, the vibrant flora withering and dying, Greg's light fading forever. She saw his final moments replayed endlessly, the pain of his sacrifice amplified 1,000-fold. The Emotivore sought to break her, to shatter her spirit, and plunge Ikor into eternal darkness. Stella staggered, but she did not fall. She clung to her memories of Greg, his quiet dedication, his unwavering belief in the power of hope, his gentle touch. She remembered his words, "Even in the darkest night, there is always a spark of light." Drawing strength from his memory, she reinforced the resonance shields, pushing back against the Emotivore's influence. Zara's forces, relentless, finally breached the outer defenses of the main ceremony chamber. A fierce, close-quarters combat erupted, the air thick with the smell of burnt crystal and the screams of the dying. The remaining defenders, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with the desperation of those who knew they were making their last stand. Seeing the situation deteriorating, Stella made a difficult decision. She ordered a strategic withdrawal to a secondary chamber, sacrificing the outer defenses to buy time and regroup. It was a painful choice, but a necessary one. Every moment gained was a victory. Then, a sound pierced through the chaos, a song. A small group of Iconian children, huddled together in a corner of the chamber, began to sing. It was a timeless song of hope, a melody shared through ages, a tribute to Ichor's strong spirit. Their voices, bright and clear, echoed in the caverns, breaking the emotivore's dark barrier. The darkness seemed to recede slightly, replaced by a fragile glimmer of light. Zara, enraged by the children's defiance, issued a new order. "Prioritize capturing Stella," she roared. "Break her will, and the rest will fall." She knew that Stella was the key, the linchpin holding the resistance together. As Zara's forces closed in, a figure emerged from the shadows, the Guardian. He charged into the fray, his crystalline armor glowing with defiant energy, creating a diversion that allowed Stella to escape deeper into the caves. He was a whirlwind of righteous fury, cutting down Zara's troops with brutal efficiency. But the Guardian was weakened, his spirit drained by the emotivore's influence. He fought valiantly, but he was outnumbered. Overwhelmed by Zara's troops, he was eventually captured, his fate unknown. Stella, guided by instinct and a faint glimmer of hope, reached a hidden chamber at the heart of the caves. It was a place of ancient power, a nexus of crystalline energy. In the center of the chamber stood an artifact, an ancient crystal pulsating with a soft, warm light. It was said to amplify positive emotions, to strengthen the bonds of hope and resilience. As Stella prepared to activate the artifact, a chilling voice echoed through the chamber. "Hope is a delusion, Stella." Zara's forces breached the chamber, surrounding her, cutting off all escape routes. Zara stepped forward, her obsidian armor gleaming in the artifact's light. "Ichor is doomed. Your resistance is futile." She raised her weapon, a dark energy blade crackling with malevolent power, ready to strike the final blow. The fate of Stella, the ceremony, and Ichor hung in the balance. As Zara prepared to weaponize the artifact, a faint song of hope echoed through the caves, a defiant whisper against her impending victory. "Silence," Zara roared, her crystalline form shimmering with terrifying rage. She backhanded Stella, sending her sprawling against the cold, damp wall of the chamber. "You think your pathetic resistance can withstand me? I hold the key to Ichor's future now." Before Zara could deliver a more decisive blow, the chamber shuddered. A coordinated attack, however small, erupted from the shadows. Reprogrammed security drones, their crimson optics now burning with blue defiance, unleashed a barrage of plasma fire. Iconian soldiers, hurt but defiant, emerged from hidden alcoves, energy blades active. The attack, though desperate, disrupted Zara's forces, a brief opportunity. Stella seized the chance. Pain lanced through her side as she scrambled away from Zara, a searing reminder of the emotivore's earlier strike. She stumbled deeper into the hidden chamber, her hand instinctively reaching for the ancient crystal artifact, its faint hum a siren's call in the chaos. With trembling fingers, Stella touched the artifact. A wave of positive energy, A shimmering aurora of hope erupted from its core, washing over the chamber. The emotivore's oppressive influence seemed to momentarily recede, replaced by a surge of renewed determination in the hearts of the defending Iconian. Even the reprogrammed drones seemed to fight with increased ferocity, but the surge was fleeting. Zara, her eyes burning with cold fury, raised a hand, revealing a device humming with dissonant energy. "Did you think I hadn't anticipated this, Stella?" she sneered. "I am centuries ahead of your naive hope." She activated the counter-resonance emitter. The air crackled as the emitter unleashed its disruptive field. A localized null zone spread around the artifact, visibly dampening its power. The positive energy, once a steady stream, began to fluctuate erratically, flickering like a dying flame. The comforting hum of the artifact devolved into a strained, uneven thrum. Stella felt a sickening lurch in her core. The artifact, meant to be a beacon of hope, was now vulnerable, teetering on the brink of corruption. If Zara could seize control of its energy matrix, she could twist it into a weapon of unimaginable power, amplifying the emotivore's influence and crushing all resistance. A heavy thud echoed through the chamber. Vorin, his crystalline armor cracked and stained with ichor, staggered into view. He leaned heavily on a makeshift staff, his face a mask of pain and tenacity. "Stella?" he rasped, his voice strained. "Zara. She's captured key members of the council, using them to force surrender." Stella's heart clenched. She knew the captured council members. They were the last vestiges of Ichor's true leadership, the ones who still remembered a time before the emotivores. Their lives, and the fate of Ichor, now rested on her shoulders. She faced an impossible choice. Continue trying to use the artifact, risking its corruption and potential weaponization by Zara, or destroy it, severing the last thread of hope, but denying Zara its power. The weight of Ichor's future pressed down on her, a crushing burden. Time seemed to slow as Stella wrestled with the agonizing decision. She thought of Greg, his quiet strength, his unwavering belief in the potential for good. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, he had sacrificed everything to give Ichor a chance. Could she, in good conscience, risk squandering that sacrifice? With a heavy heart, Stella made her choice. She reached out and deactivated the artifact. The shimmering energy field vanished, leaving only the cold, inert crystal. "We can't let her have it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We have to hide it." Vorin nodded grimly. "I know a way. A complex illusion. It will buy us time." Working quickly, despite their injuries and the encroaching threat, Stella and Vorin set about concealing the artifact. They manipulated the surrounding crystals, creating a complex illusion that masked its presence, misdirecting Zara's senses and creating a false trail. But their efforts were not enough. With a deafening roar, Zara's forces breached the inner chamber. The remaining defenders fell quickly, overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. Stella and Vorin were seized, their resistance crushed. Zara stalked towards them, her crystalline eyes burning with triumph and fury. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice dripping with venom. "Where have you hidden the artifact?" Stella met her gaze, her own eyes unwavering. "You will never have it," she said, her voice ringing with defiance. "Ichor will not be enslaved." Zara's smile was cruel. "We shall see how long you resist." She gestured to her guards. "Detain him, show her the risk of protest." Vorin called out as Zara's forces began. Energy whips lashed across his crystalline form, causing him to convulse in agony. Stella watched, her heart breaking, but she refused to yield. She drew strength from her belief in Icor's future, from Greg's sacrifice, from the faint song of hope that still echoed in her heart. Zara, frustrated by Stella's unwavering resistance, abandoned her brutal tactic. "Enough," she snapped. "Scan the entire chamber. I want every crevice, every hidden space, analyzed. Find the artifact." Advanced sensors hummed to life, bathing the chamber in an eerie, pulsating light. The walls shimmered as the sensors probed every inch of the space, dissecting the illusions, revealing the hidden truths. A triumphant grin spread across Zara's face. "There," she exclaimed, pointing to a seemingly solid wall. "The artifact is hidden behind that illusion." Stella's heart sank. Their deception had failed. With a triumphant cry, Zara strode towards the concealed artifact. She reached out and grasped it, her fingers closing around the cold, inert crystal. "Victory is mine," she declared, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I will use its power to crush the remaining resistance and reshape Icor in my image." As Zara prepared to weaponize the artifact, a faint song of hope, barely audible above the din of battle and Zara's triumphant pronouncements, echoed through the cave. It was a fragile melody, a testament to the enduring spirit of the Iconians, a promise of future resistance, a whisper of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The fate of Icor hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of oblivion. The surge subsided, the oppressive weight on Icor lifting, as if a physical burden had been cast aside. The crystalline structures, once dulled and fractured, pulsed with renewed light, their facets shimmering with an inner brilliance that had been absent for too long. Zara was gone. As Zara activated the artifact, Greg, having anticipated this move, initiated his plan, revealing he had subtly modified the artifact's core during his earlier research. Greg's modification triggered a fail-safe, causing the artifact to resonate with his unique bio-signature, disrupting Zara's control and creating a surge of pure energy. Greg, knowing this surge will be fatal, used his remaining strength to redirect the energy, cleansing Icor of the Immersive's influence and weakening Zara. The energy surge overwhelmed Zara, disrupting her connection to the Immersive, causing her physical form to destabilize and ultimately disintegrate. With Zara defeated and the Immersive's influence eradicated, the withering began to reverse, and Icor started to heal, its crystalline structures regaining their brilliance. Stella, devastated by Greg's sacrifice, cradled his body. Tears, like liquid starlight, streamed down her crystalline cheeks, each drop a testament to the profound grief that resonated within her. Her fingers, usually firm and precise, trembled as she brushed a stray strand of hair from his forehead. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice a broken chime. "You gave everything." She felt the warmth fading from his skin, the last vestiges of his life ebbing away, and a sob racked her frame. Gratitude warred with despair, a painful paradox of salvation bought with unbearable loss. The Iconian Council, witnessing Greg's sacrifice and the restoration of Icor, publicly acknowledged their misjudgment of humanity. The pronouncement echoed across the crystalline plains, carried on the revitalized energy currents of the planet. "We were blind," the elder counselor stated, his voice resonating with remorse. "We saw weakness where there was unparalleled strength. We dismissed empathy as a flaw, when it is, in truth, our greatest salvation." Stella, now a symbol of change, advocated for a new era of cooperation and understanding between humans and Iconians, vowing to honor Greg's memory. Her words, once measured and formal, now burned with passionate conviction. Greg Wright showed us the true potential of humanity. She declared before the assembled council, "Let us not squander his gift. Let us build a future where understanding bridges the gaps between our species." A memorial was erected in Greg's honor, a towering crystal spire depicting him not as a warrior, but as a gentle explorer, his hand outstretched towards a budding crystalline flower. It stood as a constant reminder of the debt Icor owed to the unassuming human who had saved them all. Icor experienced a cultural renaissance, embracing new perspectives and valuing diversity, inspired by Greg's example. Iconian art, once focused on martial prowess and stoic resilience, now celebrated empathy, creativity, and the beauty of the natural world. Human scientists and explorers were welcome to Icor, fostering collaboration and knowledge exchange, strengthening the bond between the two species. Joint research projects flourished, exploring the mysteries of Icor's unique ecosystem and seeking new ways to protect it. Stella dedicated her life to studying Greg's research, ensuring his discoveries benefited both humans and Iconians, creating a lasting legacy of his work. She established a research institute dedicated to xenobotany and interspecies understanding, named in his honor, the Greg Wright Institute for Planetary Harmony. A new generation of Iconians grew up learning about Greg's sacrifice, understanding that true strength lies not in physical power but in empathy and selflessness. His story became a cornerstone of their education, a testament to the transformative power of human compassion. Icor, now thriving and vibrant, served as a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of understanding and cooperation, forever shaped by the actions of one human. Its crystalline structures shimmered with renewed brilliance, reflecting the light of a brighter future. A future built on the foundation of empathy, sacrifice, and the enduring legacy of Greg Wright.